Hey folks, one last time for this week. There's a lot of information that's out there, and you all are expected to kind of digest this and process this. So, imagine if you had to do this in only a month. So, we are actually officially not done with the semester yet. We're going to extend this because I just feel like you need more time to kind of process a lot of this information, and so I hope that's okay. So, again, for module number 7, there's a lot of information out there, and if you take a look, there's so much stuff that you can take a look at. Be sure that you do take a look at Dr. O'Connell's presentation. That it's a video that you can watch there about global health experiences and some of her insights. That is something we would like you to kind of gain there. And this Contributions of Ethics to Public Health, if you'll take a look at that, it's a very short, I think it's even an opinion, it might even be an opinion-based article. Yeah, it's an editorial, so it's not a whole lot. So, but ethics is important in the programming of public health community programs, and so there's a lot more that can be said about this, and your textbook touches on it just briefly. But so take a look at that, because that is some good information. There's also a lot of different things out here. Applying theory in community schools and work sites, for those of you who are thinking about some of your interventions, especially with young people or with workplace issues. This is good stuff in here. It's the slides are not hard to follow. I'm not going to go through those, but this might be a consideration for you when you think about how you want to do an intervention. How do you get people to come? How are you going to recruit people? Well, one of the things that this particular portion of the chapter talks about, workplace and school, one of the things that they have going for them is that you have lots of people that are there for specific periods of time, and it's usually because they have to be. So why not take advantage of that if you can? And then even on further down, adult learning theory and educational strategies, take a look at that. There's some really good stuff there. It's also in your textbook, and they're going to have you do there's even a little way that you can kind of take a look at and see what type of learner that you are. So there's a little, you take yourself a little quiz, and it'll show you exactly what to do, and maybe you find out a little bit of something about you. Or in the event of that you take this, it gives you consideration about how people learn differently. Not everybody likes to read. Some people are more visually oriented. Some people are more audibly oriented. Some people have to be doing things in order for that to stick. And that may be one of the ways that you go about in framing your intervention, depending upon your population and what might be good there. So there's all kinds of stuff for you that you could look there at. There's also some sites out here. There's some 8 steps for effective coalitions. There's just other stuff that you can take a look at. But really all I wanted to do, let me go back here real quick. Sorry. Content. Yowza. There it is. So just briefly, so if we can think about this for just a second, about communication strategies. And so again, we're going back, let's go back to your paper that you're writing. And so you've identified your problem, you're thinking about a particular theory or theories that you want to use for that. Now you've got to put it all together, and now you have to kind of show us how you're going to do this. And again, the logic model kind of goes along with this as well too. So when we think about communication strategies, that's something that, we don't want to leave just kind of haphazard. There's lots of information out there. Communication is very important, and there's lots of competing voices out there. And of course, thinking positively about this, you want your intervention to go well. You want communication that you have to be heard above other things, whether other things that are true or pseudoscience and stuff like that. And so here are some strategies. And so you can do this through communicating through the public media. Of course, we're talking about the internet. We're talking about mobile and wireless technology, which we all have access to. Social media is out there. Now, you think about social media. Of course, everything that you read on social media is true, right? Everything that you read on the internet is true, right? So No, it's not. We know that. You might be even thinking about cable television, satellite broadcasting, and then, even other things. What else can we consider? Maybe radio is something that we would want to kind of look at there. The studies actually say that this is the most popularly consumed media channel. Maybe you want to do print or magazines, or go the new way and have digital readerships. So when you're thinking about your communications campaigns, and so you want to disseminate your information to influence behavior in a particular group or population, and this can even go along with social marketing, and you want to do this through a coordinated process. Of course, you're going to look for your target audience. Who do you need to reach? And for some of you, who you need to reach is not actually the population that you're working with. Sometimes, especially if you're working with children, unless they're people who are making lots of decisions on themselves, sometimes you have to go through their parents or their caregivers or authority figures. Identify the best communication channels. Identify, determine the message that you're going to communicate through this. Think about your sequence of activities. How are you going to unfold it? Are you going to just drop it all out there all at once, or are you going to kind of build momentum? And when you think about these things, you can kind of think about how you see advertising is it this way. And then, the use of formative research. And, so it's just throwing information out there is not necessarily a good thing, but you want to do formative research to make sure that the message and the channels are effective. And so communication campaigns, there's lots of different ways that you can do this. So maybe you're going to do mass media. Maybe you're going to do interpersonal communication. Maybe you are going to, especially if your population is hidden or disadvantaged, maybe you want to go through indigenous channels. Because really, you're doing all this work, they need to be heard. They need to be remembered against the din or the noise of other competing messages in the media, because everybody's got an opinion on something. And so, of course, we're coming as public health professionals and we want to get that information out there. So how do we do that and be heard above everybody else? Looky here, 4-stage planning. So you've got your planning and your strategy development. You've got your developing and pre-testing of your concepts, messages, and materials. And for some of you, maybe with your interventions, maybe you're doing a pilot program. Before you go and try to do something that goes statewide, maybe you want to focus on a particular population in a particular area to see if it works. You also, after this development and pre-testing, you're going to implement the program. And then, of course, you're going to assess effectiveness and make refinements. So you're going to plan, you're going to develop, you're going to do your program, and then you're going to step back and you're going to assess your effectiveness. And when you find out what works, that's great. When you find out what maybe didn't work like you thought it was going to be, maybe then you can tweak it. So that is something that you would want to do for communication campaigns. And so you even have media advocacy. So, we want to use mass media to apply pressure to advance public health policy or healthy public policy. And so we want to influence public opinion. We want to influence policymakers, because they're the ones who make things happen. And then we want to influence that policy itself. And so, thinking about a goal might not be individual behavior change. Maybe we just have to reach the policymakers within a particular institution, whether it's in school, whether it's in government, whether it's within a particular population and how they're stratified. And so this could consist of a full-scale mass media campaign. Or, we're looking to influence the policymakers and the policy along the way. You can develop and maintain relationships. You want to make contact with people. You want to provide background information. You want to establish yourself or your organization as a source, and you want to establish yourself as an expert. We want to provide information that's useful. A lot of times people are looking for that human face, that face that they can identify with, instead of just a bunch of statistics and numbers. You've got materials that are typically used with media advocacy, maybe a press release or a news release. Maybe you write a letter to the editor or of a magazine or of a newspaper. Maybe you do an opinion piece. Maybe it might even that you're going to make a presentation to some type of board or some kind of governing body. That would make some sense there. And so when you're thinking about communication plans, what's the campaign name? Come up with something that's catchy. I would even encourage you all for your interventions that you're going to do for the solution paper. Don't just call it so-and-so and so health initiative. That's kind of boring. It doesn't stick in people's minds. But if you can think about what you're trying to communicate and if you can be creative about that. Communication plan. You've got a campaign name. Who is the agency that's doing this? What's the health issue that you're looking to address? What's the overall health objective? Not everything. What are the communication objectives there? Who's your primary audience? Who's your secondary? What are your formative research activities going to look like? What are your purposes? What's your results? What is your message by audience segment? So if you have a broad-based campaign, if you're trying to reach different sections of the population, you got to tailor it to those folks. So you might be tailoring that message according to the audience segment. What kind of materials do you need? How are you going to, what's your message dissemination? What's your timeline? Everybody needs a timeline. What's your sequence? What kind of staff do you need? What kind of resources do you need? What kind of partners do you want to have? What kind of collaborations can you work with? Because usually partner collaborations usually mean that you're sharing some of the load and maybe some of the expense too. And then think about that evaluation plan. How are you going to evaluate this? How are you going to know that your communication channel campaign was effective? There's individual models, there's social diffusion models, go back to diffusion of innovation on that. So are you looking to change public awareness or public norms, or are you looking to interact with elite opinion? So when you think about theory too, what information are you looking to communicate? How are you going to encode this? In other words, how are you going to package this? What do you want to communicate? What kind of behavioral theories are you going to be using? Sounds like your paper, doesn't it? And so what are your social models? And a big thing here is just the message got to have meaning for the population that you're trying to reach. Not necessarily so much for you, not in our language and all the things that we do, but it has to have meaning for the population. And if it doesn't have meaning, they're not going to pay attention. And if they don't pay attention, then they're not going to take advantage of it. And if they don't take advantage of it, then the issue is just not heard at all. So, what kind of channels for dissemination? How, what's the most effective way to do that? There's some improvement examples that are listed out here that you can kind of look at, and also when you're thinking about your communications campaign, you're also kind of thinking, how are you going to reach people? Or unless you're my age or older, you probably don't read a newspaper, so why would you use that unless you're trying to reach people my age or older? Social media, the internet, Instagram. I mean, you can think through this, but this is just something that you might want to consider. It's a part of a bigger picture. It's not everything, but it's a communication campaign that how are you going to recruit people? How are you going to let people know about your intervention? How do people know if they qualify? Those kinds of things. And then what are you trying to change? I hope everybody has a good 4th of July. I'll see you next week.